Hello, and welcome to the TMG Fireside Chat. The premise of the TMG Fireside Chat is to bring leaders across the fire protection and life safety industry together and talk about industry-wide challenges and highlight solutions that will help to solidify the industry's foundation while preparing for growth through new technologies and strategies. In this episode, we get to know Jack Coffelt a little bit better. Jack's a U.S. Navy veteran and, like me, a plank owner of a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser. Jack was on the original crew of CG-73 USS Port Royal. Jack, thank you for your military service. Jack has been in the fire protection industry for more than 30 years, spending time in both fire sprinkler and fire alarm. Jack has spent the last 4 years of his career on the software technology side of the industry. In this episode, we hit on the evolution of technology in fire protection, the connection between new technology and the development and adoption of new codes to support that new tech, the use and deployment of inspection, test, and maintenance technology like ServiceTrade, and he highlights that 60% of fire life safety inspection companies continue to use pen and paper to complete inspections. We closed the podcast talking about the recent publication of NFPA 915, the standard for remote inspections and tests, which was released on May 13th, 2023. We then highlight the collection of data and how it can be used through the next evolution of the codes, and NFPA 950, the standard for data development and exchange for the fire service, and NFPA 951, the guide to building and utilizing digital information. A lot of our discussions are focused on the future of the industry. And for me, it really highlights some great things and where we're headed. We hope that you enjoy the episode.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Fireside Chat with John Mackey. Fortunate enough today to be sitting down with an industry friend of mine, Jack Coffelt, with ServiceTrade, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the space around technology, some new developments in the fire protection codes, and learn a little bit more about Jack's background. Former fire alarm expert, if you will, and then morphed into a sprinkler system guy, and now a wide array of knowledge across the industry as a whole. And so we're going to talk about the industry itself, learn a little bit more about Jack's background, and then the role that technology is playing in how we do things. So for all members, of course, or all listeners, encourage you to like and follow the Mackey Group blog and the Mackey Group YouTube channel, where you can find the video version of this podcast and anything else we push out. But like and follow all the socials, et cetera, et cetera. So, Jack, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Glad we could do this. We're coming to you from NAFED Chicago, the National Association of Fire Equipment Distributors. We will not have Mr. Steve Ford with Century Fire presenting, but we are sealing his breakout room until he gets here. So thank you in advance, Steve, for that. So one of the things I always do to start these podcasts is a segment I call rapid fire questions, right? Just to kind of, yes, exactly.
Right.
Give people an opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. So I think one common link we all have is, as part of American society, sports teams. You and I had a conversation last night about, some of your sports teams. I don't want to tip that off right now, but what teams do you truly follow?
Living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it's obvious I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm a Rangers fan, I'm a Mavericks fan. Go Stars, way to go, pull it out last night. And one thing I also follow heavily is UFC, MMA. Yep. I'm a former wrestler and wrestling coach, and so I watch those very often.
Okay.
Quite enjoy that.
Cool. So, yeah, I think what's interesting on the MMA side is just the evolution of the sport. I think that Dana White is a marketing expert.
Genius. Absolute genius.
At how he's done this. And it's constantly in front of you, right? Number one. And number two, again, because of the world we live in around social media and everything else, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on other platforms.
And they're doing weekly shows now.
Yeah.
It used to be you would have 3 or 4 fights a year. Yeah. And then now, with the tough competition and that they're literally having fights every weekend now.
Yeah.
So lots to watch there.
It's a big business.
Very big business.
So that's cool. What about food. I was hesitant to ask the question because you're a Texas guy, so I know where this is going. But I'm going to ask the question.
Sure.
So, what's your favorite foods?
So interestingly enough, I'm a closet chef.
Okay.
I have 2 children that are professionally trained chefs.
Uh-huh.
Can't keep up with them. I like to make my own pastas. I like to make my own gravy. I do a lot of pizzas.
Yeah.
I do a lot of New Mexican food, being from New Mexico.
Yeah.
I know you're looking for me to say the barbecue. I'm okay at it. I'm still working. That's something I work on real hard. But and I just do a lot of off the cuff stuff.
Yeah.
I'll see somebody make something, I'll make it and make it mine. I'll Jackify it, if you will.
Yeah.
And it works pretty well.
That's cool. No, you're right. I was hesitant to ask the question because if I'm going to get a brisket answer like I get from every other person in Texas, right? But I like the curveball around pasta. So, personal note, my wife and I went to Italy back in September and took a pasta cooking class. And I absolutely loved it to the point where for Thanksgiving, we don't do a traditional Thanksgiving. We always do some pizzas or something else. My son and I made a pasta dish for the family. So, fresh pasta at home. That was the first time we tried it. Came out good, not perfect, but
nice. Interestingly enough, my wife and I did the same thing. We were in Italy a few years back for our 25th anniversary, and the last day that we were there, she got us a cooking class because she knows that's my thing. Yeah. We had an amazing time, and then I've actually recreated those meals at home a time or two, and outstanding.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love it. I like the comment around a closet chef. I'm willing to try more stuff, especially as I get older and have a little bit more time at home.
Yeah, I recently just changed out my electric cooktop for an induction cooktop, and that's a whole new world of control and whatnot. So I'm learning how to play with that. And it's quite fun.
Cool. All right, so you made a point earlier that you grew up in New Mexico. You live in Dallas now.
I do.
So kind of link back to high school. We all had yearbooks. They still do yearbooks today. And your classmates all have the opportunity to identify certain things. So under the umbrella of, your classmates would have voted you most likely to.
Off the cuff, I'd say die. So I was a little bit fearless and would do, anything to get our group of guys were doing and hanging out. Living in the mountains, we would go off-roading quite a bit. I may or may not have jumped my Beetle off of a little small cliff one time and cracked.
Confirm nor deny. Confirm nor deny. Right?
Neither. So to have made it past 21 was a big plus for me.
Good. And
we're still kicking with that. So
that's good.
Yeah.
that's good. It's funny how certain things we latch on to in high school.
Oh, absolutely.
And what have you. So, how do you find yourself in fire protection? And I'll start there first.
It's a great question, and the very simple answer is out of high school. I was 17 and I joined the Navy, and I became an interior communication electrician. And an eye seaman, and within that rate, we did fire alarm stuff, we did fire suppression stuff, we did closed circuit TV stuff. We, lots of low voltage communication. And with that, I worked on fire protection systems on an aircraft carrier, USS Carl Vinson, Go Eagle. And then I had the good fortune of building the USS Port Royal. I was a plank owner on that CG-73. We actually just were in Hawaii in September to decommission our ship. But on both of those ships, I worked on fire suppression systems, was my primary project there. And when we got out of the service in the late 90s, I transitioned into the civilian sector and just continued on with what I've been doing for 10 years.
That's great. I, too, am a Navy vet. I've talked about this. However, you just made a reference to your ship. I've never talked about the Port Royal. So I commissioned CG-57, Lake Champlain.
Nice.
And commissioned in 1988 in New York City, and we just found out 2 weeks ago it's being decommed September 1st in San Diego, and the 100 plank owners are all rallying. They say, all right, we're going to San Diego for the decom. So
we had a little over 400 crew members on the Port Royal, and 100 did show up in Hawaii. Now I think had we done it in San Diego, but we were home ported in Hawaii, so and that's a little bit tougher of a trip to make out. So that's great, and I think you're gonna have a blast. I'll tell you, some of the guys on the crew really took charge of this situation. We've got an amazing challenge coin that the guys made. One side was for the commissioning, one side was for the life and the decommissioning. It's the coolest challenge coin I have in my collection.
All right, we're gonna take this conversation offline because I need to learn about that. Because
will do.
That's awesome. So very cool. and thank you for your service.
And thank you for yours.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those days back in late '80s, early '90s, and the things that we did. The ships, the CGs were amazing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The aircraft carrier I was on was Carl Vinson, but we were in overhaul at the beginning of Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
Yeah.
So that was a unique perspective to see a 27-story ship.
In dry dock.
1,000 feet long in dry dock, literally up on blocks. Yeah. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. Very cool. All right, so let's kind of get into the meat of the matter. I mean, we talked to you at the opening about technology from a highlighted perspective about technology and the role it's playing in fire protection. So, from your view, what the evolution of technology, where are we at today? And let's start there. Where's technology at today in the fire protection space?
It's a great question. It's a great topic. I think we're starting to see some minds click into the fact that we need to digitize and get with the IoT of things, so that we can provide data back to building management systems, owners, et cetera. And I think we're at the tipping point of that. There's some companies out there doing some really cool things right now, and they're just starting to do that. We've got wireless sensors coming up. We've got Bluetooth technology coming up. We've got smart sprinklers now. I was just watching a video before we started this about this newfangled fire hydrant. So they're really starting to accept the idea that we're not in the Stone Ages anymore. Even though our fire protection systems are pipe and water or wire and conduit and strobes and pull stations, we can get more out of those systems to be able to provide customers, owners, and firefighters life-saving information, so that we can protect these buildings that are going up so much faster these days.
Right.
So the more that we can do to provide that kind of information to those that need it is better. And I really think we're on the cusp of that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? I think I've been in the space for 17 years. You've been longer, right? 20.
A little over 30. I hate to date myself.
That's all right. That's funny. So I look at the evolution and the pace that we're at, right? I used to work at Ansel, and we're pretty methodical with new products, right? We can only manage so many products in the pipeline at a given time. And let's say it takes 10 years to develop a new, piece of equipment or new technology. At the same time, you're trying to match that up with the code coming out that's going to accept that new technology, right? So that extends it out even later. Say, okay, now we're into like a 10 or 20-year window, right? So are you seeing, we see what's going on in the manufacturers. I think it's more so with regard to IoT and integrated type systems, like you said, smart sprinklers, and concepts like that. Are we seeing the code cycles adopt technology, number one? And number two, are they moving faster to keep up with the new technology that's coming in?
It's a great question. And I actually have a very interesting scenario on that.
Yeah.
So I recently I have a monthly code corner, Jack's Code Corner on LinkedIn. And last month's was in regard to fire deluge systems and pre-action systems, actuators, the monitoring of those. I was part of the team that put in the submission to PI back in 2016 for NFPA 13, and it was highly debated. It was a known problem, and they didn't really know what to do, but they gave it a 5-year window for going into effect, just so they could give manufacturers time to build the device to be able to actually monitor that actuator to send a signal back. So if it's ever disconnected, you'll know that your system is inoperable.
Right.
So the code committee, the technical committee, recognized we don't have the technology today, but we think within this period of time, and they gave it a 5-year window, that we can do that. And there were several companies out there that came earlier and had it ready to go when that date came in January of 2021. So to answer the question, they are in Internet of Things and technology is changing at blazing speeds.
Yeah.
The thing that kind of slows us down a little bit is our code process. We have 3-year, 5-year, some variables, and within that time, you can have a lot of different changes. So there's pluses and minuses on both sides.
Yeah.
I think manufacturers are trying to be proactive. I know there's a lot of new innovation going on at multiple companies that we're familiar with. And then the trick is you have to be able to get it in there, and there's a little vicious cycle. Is it listed? Is it not listed? If it's not listed, some technical committees don't want to put it in the code until it gets listed, but then the listing companies say, well, we can't put it create a listing until you put it in the code. So we watched that with the automatic testing switch, water flow switch Potter puts out. For 2 cycles, it was, I can't do it yet. And then they finally got together and agreed, okay, we have this product. Let's go ahead and put it in the code. We'll get the listing, and then now you can use it. So it's a very interesting process.
Yeah, I think it highlights again the need for everything to kind of speed up a little faster. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The technology itself is moving, right?
Absolutely.
So then how do you create the solution to meet the need for the technology, and then get the codes to align with it as well? I mean, I'm sure it could, in certain codes are going to move faster than others. Like you said, it's a 3-year window or a 5-year window with regard to revisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very good. That's interesting. How do you view the use of technology in the space? I mean, I know you work for ServiceTrade. Prior to that, you were with Asurio, Bird Dog, and so you're spending a lot of time in the ITM test and maintenance side of things as it relates to technology. But what do you see? How do you see it being used? Number one, and where it's headed with regards to the use and acceptance, I guess.
So it's really interesting. In the fire life safety world, again, we have some long-established companies and long-established best practices, and a lot of it was pen and paper, right? And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with a customer just last week that we went to talk to them, and they were asking, how does our software print out on a triplicate form so that they can get a little dot matrix printer to print this out and keep a copy for them? And I said, really, that's what we're doing? Let me help you move forward just a little bit. So believe it or not,
do they even still make dot matrix printers?
I don't know. I haven't seen one in quite some time. But we say dot matrix, and everybody that's watching hears that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's mind-boggling that 60% of fire protection contractors that we've talked to are still on pen and paper.
Oh, hold on. Say that percentage again.
60%.
60.
And that's across the spectrum of fire life safety. That's extinguisher companies, suppression companies, alarm companies, sprinkler companies. They still go out and do pen and paper. It's, you've got chicken scratch. Can I read this? Can I not read this? I got coffee stains on it, etc. So it's interesting that
spends 2 weeks in the truck before it even gets back to the office.
Exactly. So, there's, and where it's at today, there's some great platforms like ours and others out there that you can take that information, digitize it, and then be able to analyze that. And from my perspective, I've been working with the NFPA's Fire Protection Research Foundation for quite some time on their big data project. Yeah. And the big data project is a beautiful project, but it's very challenged to get data and to get data in a similar fashion. Yeah. But what I see is as we go digitized and we start doing inspection reports in a data format, maybe in a little bit more consistent means, we can take that data, we can put it into the Fire Protection Research Foundation model, and we can start seeing trends of, do we really need to be inspecting this on a quarterly basis? Do we need to be inspecting this on an annual basis? Right. Do we need to be inspecting, small retail shops once a year, or should they be every 3 years? Mm-hmm. Hospitals, should they be more, et cetera? But we can't make those determinations until we build that foundation of data to really give it a good analytics and make some of those decisions.
So if I remember back a couple of years ago, I gave a presentation at the FSSA conference specific to codes, and there are 3 specific codes that were in the pipeline. We're going to talk about 915 here at the end of the conversation, but the other 2 I presented on, I think NFPA 950, which was data collection or data reporting, and to your point, standardizing on how the data had to be collected and reported. And then 950, so that was the collection side. And then 951 was the report side, right? So I talked to some friends of mine at Jensen Hughes, and I said, okay, give me the perspective of where things are at in the evolution as it's a sequencing. And they said 915 was the big push, right? Remote inspection. But 950, 951 is going to be the deliverable down the road. So where does 950 and 951 stand today in the code cycle?
I'd be remiss to answer that. It's not one I'm very familiar with. I do recall talking with the Fire Protection Research Foundation about that. There was a PhD on the Fire Protection Research that was driving that. I think he was, a big driver in that. I haven't followed that one very much, so I'd be remiss to say.
Well, we have NFPA here in about 3 weeks, so maybe we'll
we
find
have
the guys that
absolutely
that are on those committees and get an update.
Absolutely,
so that's cool. No, I I do agree. I think that what the technology is allowing is a collection of data. And I don't know, to your point, I don't care what platform you're on.
Oh yeah.
Right. But then how do we get that back to some collection source to standardize and really analyze what we have? Because I think that if we're able to track the performance of a sprinkler system, an alarm system, you name it. I mean, there's something that could be said there. So good stuff. All right. What about let's get into 915 and what's going on with remote inspection.
So 915 is a new standard for remote inspection that was initially started in about 2017, 2018. There are some papers that were created. The Standards Council decided that's something we need to look into. And they recently, in April, at the Standards Council meeting, they approved it. And on May 13th, they've now made it effective. So remote inspections is an official NFPA standard now.
Okay.
And right now, it's in a skeletal framework, but they're setting the foundation of how we can do remote inspections through various means of technology. Whether you're going to use drones, whether you're going to use cameras, whether you're going to use analog cameras, whether you're going to use vehicles. And they've got a framework set up for it so that in times like the pandemic, if we still need to monitor these and take care of these important fire life safety systems, but if buildings are shut down, this, that, and the other, we need another means to verify that everything's still going to operate, right? Whether it's occupied or not, things happen. And so 915 is setting the foundation for being able to look into these fire life safety systems with technology in an approved manner. Everything in the NFPA is with the AHJ's approval, right? So AHJ will have to approve this. But it's pretty exciting that 915 is here. And what I see happening with 915 is, today in NFPA 25 and NFPA 72, there are remote testing sections that are a little bit light. What I see, and this is just my opinion, is that those sections could eventually move into 915 and give us much more guidance on, if I'm going to fly a drone into this room so I can get it real close to these sprinkler heads and come across and see, am I corroded, am I loaded, X, Y, Z.
Right.
That's all could be in 915, but it's going to give us a good foundation to use technology to give us the data we need to verify that we're actually doing the right things out in the field.
Right. Yeah, I think that, like you said, with regard to, how we use the technology, I know I've talked to some folks that are on 25 and on 72, and they're saying, we're starting to put clauses in those codes that open the door for technology to come in as well, right?
Absolutely.
It's a sequencing, like we talked about with regard to product. You got to sequence the codes to kind of get them to all line up as well. Right?
Absolutely.
Because it's all line and verse, and there's your, focus on ITM for sprinkler, right? You're not thinking about 915, so there's got to be a linkage.
Right. Yeah, and they'll reference each other, and they'll get correlated down the road.
Very good. Well, we're going to put a link into on the podcast notes specific to the NFPA 915 on NFPA. Like you said, it's still in a skeleton type structure, and it's just published, right? So it's out, but there's a lot to learn about it and how we deploy it. Right?
Absolutely. So May 13th. So here it is. I think we're May 26th, 27th.
13 days ago.
Yeah. So it's pretty neat, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it can do.
Yeah,
and how it can be implemented.
I think it's a game changer. I mean, I told that when I spoke on it 3 years ago, I said, this code's coming. So be prepared. And take ownership for in your community or in your market, because it gives you the opportunity to deploy more technology to meet the needs of your customers.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's great. Well, Jack, I always finish every one of these podcasts with one question. We've got this theme running through all these things around mentorship and leadership. If you had the opportunity to work with one person who you really looked up to, helped you grow into the leader that you are today, or had the most fun working with, who would that be and why?
That's a difficult question. It really is. I had to think about it for a little bit, but the answer for me is a gentleman back in Coppell, Texas, by the name of Steve Williams. Steve is Vice President of Security Fire Systems out of Coppell. Long time. His family goes back generations, back to the Ladue Fire, if anybody knows that. And Steve took me under his wing. He brought me in to work in his alarm division, run the alarm division. And over time, he started cross-training me on how to do sprinkler inspections as well. And then eventually, I took over, all the inspections for that company. But Steve really gave me guidance, and he was a patient man. He was a hard man, but he was a patient man, and he really taught me how to look at things from a fire life safety perspective. Understand that what we do matters. right? And so what I can proudly say, and I've said this many times, any system that I've ever interacted with, worked on, whether it was a fire alarm system, a sprinkler system, suppression system, whatever, in the case it was needed, it operated as intended.
Yeah.
Because we didn't take shortcuts, we didn't cut corners, we didn't, bypass things. We did the right thing, whether it took a little bit more time or a little bit more money. And that was Steve's coaching for me.
Yeah. And
I've really taken that to heart. And as I've mentored others throughout the process, I try to do the same thing and help them understand what we do really does matter.
Right. Yeah, there's a point that was made in the Las Vegas conference. Aaron Dickens spoke to it during his presentation around the future of our industry. And then Deputy Fire Marshal Brian Scholl from City of Phoenix talked about the relationship between fire protection contractors and AHJs. And both Aaron and Brian, not prompted, two separate presentations, said the work that fire protection contractors do is to save the lives or protect the lives of the heroes, the firefighters that are going in.
Absolutely.
Right? To your point, the firefighters have an expectation that we are going to maintain those systems in accordance with the codes so that when they respond to a call, they know that the system's operating.
Exactly.
Right? Sprinkler heads are popped, kitchen systems went off, right? And they're controlling the environment. So when they get there,
they can go do what they do.
Absolutely.
In as safe a manner as possible.
Yes. Yeah. No, the ones going in the building.
Absolutely.
Right. We show up after. So that's great. Well, I think we're going to wrap up there. We got Steve's presentations about to start. We got a little audience kind of mingling around, but Jack, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, John.
Down. Yeah,
I've enjoyed it very much.
And, we'll have Jack's contact information in the notes. I think you should probably see it across the graphic at the bottom. So if you have any questions about Jack's company, what they do with regard to service trade and Jack's role with regard to the relationships he's building, or his work in the codes, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jack. And you can always reach out to myself. And all the contact information is going to be in the notes for there as well. So thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, great.
Appreciate it.
Hey guys, thank you for listening and going on this journey with us. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give the TMG Fireside Chat a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to like, follow, and share TMG on all socials, as well as all podcast platforms. And finally, be sure to tell your friends across the fire protection industry about the TMZ Fireside Chat. Thank you and be safe.